Hi, I'm Tom Landon from Blue Ridge PBS and ECHO, and I want to welcome you to a very special program produced by our own Sadie Shartzog. It's the second in our occasional series called Field Notes, which captures live performances shot on location. In 2016, Roanoke Lee Hunsaker had a vision of a curated live storytelling event for Southwest Virginia. A writer who comes from a long line of storytellers, Lee started by hosting a series of small events, and the word grew. Called Hoot and Holler, the stories usually follow a theme, which can be anything from tales about first dates, frenemies, salvation, or even a life in drag. The program you're about to see was recorded at the historic Grandin Theater in November of 2021, and the theme for the night was Serendipity. It features tales of loss, love, and travel. Warning, these stories are told by grown-ups for an audience of grown-ups and may feature adult situations, so we've tried to take care to bleep any words that you might find offensive. But parents may want to watch the stories first and decide if they're appropriate for children. Finally, the views expressed in these stories are those of the storytellers alone and may not reflect the opinions or attitudes of Blue Ridge PBS or ECHO TV. And now, enjoy the show.
When I think about the definition of serendipity, I can't help but think of how it's come to be that I stand in front of you tonight. And I'm going to start crying.
Oh, we love
you! The definition is luck or good fortune in finding something good accidentally. Well, when Hoot and Holler was born 5 years ago now, I could not have possibly understood that our community would be rallying around live storytelling like this. Not only did our community rise up, but also this venture has breathed new meaning into my own life. Bearing witness to stories as they are birthed, walking with brave and hilarious and sometimes terrified storytellers as they step into their own truths has become my greatest passion. A lot of people have gotten us here. Every single audience member, every single beautiful venue, and of course, every single voice that has mustered the courage to stand up here. This process is not for the faint of heart. It's a completely nonsensical and insane thing to do, and yet here we are. Tonight, I'd like to thank the fabulous staff of the Grandin Theater, our home, which feels so good. They always welcome us so warmly and treat us so well, and it's wonderful to be back on this stage. Also, of course, our DJ, Sam Lunsford, who we love. I'd also like to welcome with fangirl enthusiasm the filming crew from Blue Ridge PBS ECHO, who's filming us tonight. What? PBS? There's probably going to be some bleeping, but we'll talk about that. We hope to have some really exciting partnerships to talk about soon, about all of that. And of course, I would be remiss not to thank in advance the 8 incredible storytellers that you're going to meet tonight. It is a brave and ballsy thing to do. We have lots of new voices tonight, and I've been telling them over and over, and some of our regulars have said, Hoot and Holler audiences are literally the best audiences on the planet Earth. So we feel it from y'all, so thank you. And then one more thing. I'd like to dedicate the show tonight to my grandmother, Jean York Lindsay, who passed away in July. She never missed a Hoot and Holler. She never missed a movie here. She was a permanent fixture in the Grandin and in my life. Normally, she would be in attendance at every show, holding court and cheering me on. I love and miss you very much, Gigi, and this one's for you. Enjoy the show. All right, and here here we go. Can I just see or hear who are very first timers? Who are virgins? Okay, we're going to be easy on you tonight. We're going to ease you in. Okay, storyteller number 1. He makes his home in Callaway, Virginia, barely a mile from where his ancestors settled in 1740. His varied career has led him through advertising agencies in New York City, presidential campaigns in Iowa, and now a retail gift shop, Big Lick Gifts at Valley View Mall. You've got to check it out, it's awesome. Joe is an avid genealogist in his spare time. He has traced several lines of his family back to the 700s. He says it's not the pedigree you look at, but the stories of each person through time who contributed to who and where you are. Please welcome first-time storyteller, y'all, extra love, Joe Stanley.
Hello! Can everyone see me behind this stand? Thank you all for having me, and just a shout out to Tina Turner. She'll be 83 this year. So, I never wanted children. I never wanted children. Has anyone here tonight, show of hands, ever met a child? They're extra. It's a lot. It's a lot to take. In 1994, I left the Valley, and I was living in New York City, living the dream that I had meticulously planned. I was coasting along. Then, in 2002, my sister, my mother, and my grandmother died in a 6-month period. Oh, wow. It was a rough period. It was tough. We have a thing in our family called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency syndrome. And it killed my sister. We killed my mother. Melissa, my sister, left behind a 16-month-old little girl named Mary. Mary's biological father had chosen not to be a part of her life, and with a single phone call, I became a single parent. It was tough. And I'm not afraid to say at the time that I looked at everything as though it had to do just with me. Look what I lost. Now, I'll also gladly say, God bless her, I'm an unashamed mama's boy. My mother, although she would never hesitate to correct you if you were wrong, she made me feel like every day the sun rose just to see my shining face. My sister used to say, you think you're the center of the universe. And? Is it so bad for you to just be a planet? She would then say, she's not a planet. And I would say, that's odd. Your face looks like Uranus. My mother could love you in a way that the prospect of living without that made it futile. Why would you want to? I couldn't see myself going on without my mother. And I always asked myself, why me? Why was this happening to me? What did I do? What could have I possibly have done to deserve this kind of loss? Well, I had Mary to take care of, and that kept me going for a bit, but if I'm honest, my caring for Mary was just a distraction from my own self-pity. And boy, did I wallow in it. And when I thought about taking care of Mary, I could only see in the future, and I could only see me, and I thought, well, how does this person ever even look at me and not see only what she lost? Let's face it, I'm the world's worst consolation prize. So I prayed, and I cried, and I prayed, and I cried, and I asked for understanding, and eventually I began to doubt my faith. And then I reconciled myself to end it. I decided I was going to kill myself. And I had a plan. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And the day came, and I laid there in my bed that morning, and I cried. I sobbed. God, help me. Just tell me what to do. Please help me. Get up. Get up. Well, now, I had put Mary's bedroom at the end of a short hall just for mine, and I placed her bed so that we could see each other. Get up. And I turned my head, and I looked down towards her room, and there was Mary, standing in her baby bed, with her arms hanging over the side, telling me to get up. And this wasn't a baby's voice. This was something otherworldly. This was a command to get up. So I got up. And I'm crying harder than I was ever crying. And I walked down the hall towards her room. And as I walk in her room, she says it one last time. Get up. And as I get close to the baby bed, her arms go out. She becomes a toddler again. And she says, love you. So I stopped praying to die. Now, I'm a hot and cold kind of person. There's not a whole lot in me that's lukewarm. So if I wasn't going to die, I was going to be the best damn parent you've ever seen. I'm talking so good, they're going to make a documentary about me. This is the kind of parenting that needs to be preserved for posterity ages from now. People are going to look and learn from me about how to be the best parent. I have a master's degree in education from New York University. I've read all the books. I mean, all the books. I knew exactly what to do. I will say I was a little bit disappointed to find out Mary had not read the books. And unfortunately, she had no clue how to respond to what was my perfect parenting. Well, Mary and I fell into a routine, and things were getting better, little bit by little bit. One of my most prized possessions is from one of my first Father's Days, and the teacher had asked them to what they loved most about their dad. And she gave them these paper donuts so that they could decorate them, and then when they were done, she wrote on the back what the child had said, and then she laminated them. And honest to God, one of my most prized possessions is a pink donut. God, it's beautiful. I wish you guys, I should have brought it with me. And on the back it says, I love my dad because he gets the poo out of my pants. I mean, I want to know who's here to deny that's love. As I said, we fell into a routine, and Mary and I became partners in crime. Every day with her was an adventure. Now, when my lesser angels would prevail, might be often or not, Mary took great pride in repeating every little detail of it to anyone who would listen to her. She was a sponge, if not a mirror. Mary chose to call me Daddy by her own accord. Sorry. Mary chose to call me Daddy by her own accord. And through her own clever mind and smart mouth, I became, let's just say it was a working relationship with every school principal in Franklin County. We had to have hard conversations. The kind of conversations that I can promise you no dad ever wants to have with his little girl. But we had them. And we soon learned that we could tell each other anything. Now, I could tell you that Mary's adolescence was difficult, but I'm still not fully convinced that that was actually her that got back off the bus the first day of middle school. I don't know who they sent to my house, but dear God, her moods turned like windmills. And mean. Ooh, she was mean. She could say 3 words and cut you to the quick. But she was resilient. And Mary's resilience convinced me to keep going. I was once telling a friend of mine about how difficult it was with Mary at the time, at her age, and a woman nearby heard us talking and chimed in and said, yeah, we all want to raise a strong, independent-minded woman. It's just a shame we have to live with them while we do it. In high school, when Mary was in high school, her biological father died. I took her to the funeral, and there were lots of people who knew who Mary was, and we didn't necessarily know who they were. And person after person after person kept coming up, expressing their condolences. And every time someone would tell Mary they were so sorry that her dad died, she'd squeeze my hand. And finally, this woman came up to her, and I know she meant well, but she said, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry that you lost your dad. And Mary went, I didn't. It's right there. But this woman doubled down. She was ready for it, and she said, no, sweetie. I mean, your real dad? And God bless Mary, she said, that is my real dad. He's the one that's been there. Mary in high school also took up to volunteer with the local rescue squad. And it was during that time that I could see her getting older and maturing, and I saw glimpses of the woman I knew she was becoming. In March 2018, I was headed home one night, and my tire blew out. I lost the tire off my entire car. I crossed the yellow line, and I crashed into another car going about 60 miles an hour head on. I had often begged Jesus to take the wheel, but I never meant that one. Thank God the young woman that I hit was not injured as badly. She had a couple bruises and was otherwise fine. I, on the other hand, broke my legs. I had a major concussion, a huge laceration on my head. I lost my eyesight temporarily, and I broke 5 ribs. Now, the best part, the icing on that cake, is that I used to keep a little can of pepper spray on my keychain. And as the car crashed and crushed, it drove my knees into the dashboard, and I maced myself. Good times. Good times. I don't have a lot of memories of the actual impact of the wreck, but I do have some foggy memories. And I remember the first one was I heard footsteps. I heard running. And I heard, that's my dad. And I'm sitting there and I can't see, and all of a sudden I feel 2 hands grab my shoulder. And I hear, it's me. Daddy, it's me. It's Mary. It's Mary. I love you. You're going to be okay. It's me. It's Mary. Now let me do my job. And as faint as those memories are, in my head I could hear her saying, get up. Get up. And in preparing for tonight and talking about the past 20 years, I realized that maybe I took the wrong cue. Mary used to come into me when I would be telling a story or about my mom, or I was sad, and she was able to comfort me in a way that only someone who had lost was able to comfort you. And I began to wonder, did I ever do that for her? So I look back and I think about how selfish I was. Going on about me as the consolation prize, and why me, and what did I do? And long before I lost my eyesight in the wreck, I was blind to the gift I'd been given. You can't take away the pain, the sorrow, the grief. That's impossible. But when you're given a hand to hold while you walk through it, that's what makes life special. Thank you.
Storyteller Joe Stanley knocking it out of the park. Now, I don't want to embarrass her, but I think Mary's here. Mary. Awesome. Wow. All right, here we go. Woo. Number 2. Our next storyteller is an artist and writer in Roanoke, where he lives with his patient wife in the world's smallest 5-bedroom house. He has 15 grandchildren, all reasons for America to be hopeful. He is the author and illustrator of 9 books for children. His latest title is Owen's Choice. You'll laugh, you'll cry, it will become part of you. He co-wrote What Would Mary Ann Do with Dawn Wells, who played Mary Ann on Gilligan's Island. He's the author of Square Heart, a book for adults that has no words. He has produced video documentaries on Winston Churchill and artist Thomas Hart Benton. His wife is his barber, so the way he looks tonight is her fault. Please welcome a fan favorite and a Hoot and Holler regular, Steve Stinson.
This happened in 1975. I was 23 years old. There was a popular book then, Europe on $5 a day. A tour guide. You know. You know. I was determined to do it on half that. And I did, by riding a bicycle on a diet of beer, chocolate bars, and oranges. When you're alone on a bicycle, you're not alone. The whole world is around you. You can stop anywhere, anytime. And when you do, people want to talk to you. How far you're riding? How far have you ridden? What's it like? I was welcomed into homes. I was pitched my tent in front yards and backyards and churchyards and farm fields and barns. I slept in parks. I slept in taverns. The international language for tourists at that time was French. You know, I never really mastered the language, but I learned I could communicate if I spoke it like John Wayne. Il est nécessaire que je fasse la pipi. And so I saw Europe on those terms until the frost was on my tent in the morning and the sun was going down early in the afternoon, and I knew that winter would be upon me. And so I bought a Volkswagen bus on the streets of Paris. $200. It had been converted to a camper. It was a real do-it-yourself project, plywood. I bought it from an American. There were no papers, and the license plate was a mystery to both of us. When you're alone in a car, you're very much alone. You're in a box. The world is outside the box. And when you stop, you're just another bloke in a car. And so it was on a rainy afternoon in Belgium, I stopped and picked up 2 Canadian hitchhikers. Their names were Diamond and Margaret. Diamond was her last name, but that's what Margaret called her, so I did too. They looked like their names. Diamond was all shine and sparkle. Margaret was the girl next door. It was like a Ginger and Mary Ann thing, except they were both small, like Mary Ann. They were clever and sassy and fun. They were touring Europe before they joined their fiancés at a military base near Munich. Other than that, they had no plan. I did have a plan. I was there to see art museums, churches, and cathedrals. And so, I became tour guide and protector of Diamond and Margaret. And we headed north into Holland and the Dutch Renaissance. My biking time had taught me that the back roads delivered the best show, and so that's how we rolled. Travel creates a bond. It just does. Even the smallest thing is beyond the ordinary, and it imprints upon you. There's no routine. You must adjust on the fly to the day and the moment and to each other. And so we adjusted. It helped that they liked beer, chocolate, and oranges. We were a little more than a month together, traveling the back roads in small towns. It wasn't long before we began to share inside jokes. We started to think we could read each other's thoughts. We refashioned ourselves the way strangers do until you're no longer strangers. The countless small things that draw you close. Hang on a minute. At a flea market in Luxembourg, the girls picked out a coat for me. It was long and black, and they liked for me to wear it with my collar up because it was more dashing. They discovered that they liked art museums, churches, and cathedrals. And I rediscovered Europe in a more enriching way. Until we arrived at the Bavarian winter and Munich. When we got to Munich, we knew it was our last day together. I dropped the girls off in the center of the city. They would find a hotel so they could get all dolled up for their fiancés the next day. I drove away to put the van somewhere. We were to meet that night at a beer hall. It was a 4-story building that sat 5,000 people. You sat at picnic tables, there was noise, there was song, there were oompa bands, and thousands upon thousands of faces besotted pink. Through this strode tall, substantial women in pigtails and dirndls. Half a dozen beer steins on each arm. They come to your table, they put it down, they put the other one down, they pick up the empties and they go away, and they never stopped moving and they never stopped smiling. I worked my way through this until I found the girls. We had a signal. It was a little Canadian flag on a stick. When I got to the table, they had joined some Australians, 4 boys and 2 girls. When I got to the table, one of the Australians, I'm going to try to do this, so. Hello, mate. The ladies have been talking about you. I've been in a lot of bars. And I've been in a lot of different company, but I've never seen anyone put away beer like those Aussies. We were instant friends, and the party was on. But still, I found myself, glancing at the girls. I already missed them, and I wanted some special moment of some kind before we said farewell. Well, after I'd drained enough of those steins to fill both arms of a dirndl woman, I stood up to find a boys' room. Instantly, I knew that I had waited too long. And then I knew that I did not know the German word for bathroom. And then I learned that besotted Germans don't speak John Wayne. And so I set off on a search, doing that run, walk, lope you see people do in airports, except mine was a little more pinched up. When I finally found the men's room, I was in it before I knew I was in it. It was bigger than this room. It had many entrances, and when I was ready to leave, little John Wayne there, I realized that I did not know the entrance I'd come in, which turned out not to matter, because when I did pick an entrance, I realized I did not know what floor I was on, which turned out not to matter, because when I did not know what floor our table was on. Meanwhile, the pink besotted faces had taken on a more rosy hue, and they were standing in the aisles. They were standing on the benches. They were standing on the tables. It was shoulder to shoulder, and they were dousing each other with beer as they swayed and sang. I knew that my only hope, which was our little Canadian flag signal, was long lost in the park. And for that matter, so was I. I was in double digits on those steins. And everywhere I looked, it was like staring at a hall of mirrors. I never saw the girls again. I did not know where their hotel was. They did not know where the van was. We never said goodbye. And I lost my coat. And my van became a box again. 2 weeks later, I'm in Venice. Christmas Eve. I'm not making this up. Christmas Eve. I'm walking the streets, quiet, and I get to the edge of the city where it meets the sea. It's black. It's cold. It's windy. I'm alone, and I'm coatless. And in the distance, off to the side, I see these shimmering white lights seem to be moving. So I head towards them. As I near them, I begin to hear tinkly music fading in and out with the wind. As I draw closer, I realize it's a carousel. As I get closer, I see that there are passengers on the carousel, and as I arrive, I see the passengers, and it's the Australians. When they see me, one of them shouts, "Hello, mate, we've got your cool coat." So I spent Christmas Eve at the Aussies Hotel. And there I learned that on the night that I disappeared, the girls went looking for me and they never came back either. And we decided that when we left town the next day, my van would be full again. When I put on my coat to go, I felt something in the pocket. It was a goodbye letter from the girls. I put my collar up. Serendipity.
Stinson, y'all. A master. I just love the spectrum of interpretations of Serendipity tonight are so beautiful, y'all. I just can't wait for you to hear all of these. Okay, number 3. First-time storyteller, extra love. Just putting that out there. She spends her days in a creative blur of being an artist, a musician, and a writer. When not in her studio, she spends all of her free time outside in the mountains with her horses. Please put your hands together. All the love, Rebecca Medlin.
I promise he's safe. My friend laughed as she plopped the saddle down with the patch. Here it was, a gorgeous Sunday in the late of 2012. And I wasn't about to let the fact that I didn't know this horse ruin my day. I trusted my friend. I couldn't help but be in total bliss. Here I was, 27, and I had just graduated from college the previous winter. My career as an art teacher was starting Monday. My whole life was ready for me to live. I had been riding horses since I was 12. And already I didn't like Patch. The more I watched him, he pinned his ears at my friend and pawed the ground impatiently. She laughed again. He's safe. She reassured me as we continued to get ready for the long trail ride through the mountains. Despite the growing concern in my stomach, I mounted up into the saddle and my friend and I hit the trail. We both couldn't stop bubbling about the future when we came to a river crossing. Patch planted his feet and refused to budge towards the rushing waters, despite the fact that my friend and her horse had already crossed. The gelding jigged and threatened to pop up onto his hind legs every time I urged him forward. I wasn't prepared when he finally leapt into the water. We both got soaked and I laughed in delight at his little temper tantrum. See? My friend smiled at me again. He's perfectly safe. Now, I'll race ya. She kicked her mare into a gallop, calling over her shoulder. Last one across the meadow has to clean the barn. Patch bolted after her, unseating me. My foot slipped from the stirrup and I grabbed the reins, trying to pull him up. Fear creeped over me as I realized he had the bit in his teeth. He was blindly flying after my friend. I desperately tried to regain my seat, grabbing at the reins that slipped from my still wet fingers. My hair whipped around my face and the ground blurred under me. All I could picture was my body trampled under Patch's hooves if I fell. In one desperate attempt, I leaned forward, far over the saddle horn, and grabbed the flopping reins. Patch leapt into the air, mad that I was trying to control him. I could see his hind feet fling over his backside with each wild buck. As I was further pushed up his neck as he started to lose control in a wild fit, the reins slipped from my hands again. As I grabbed a fistful of mane, trying to desperately throw my weight back into the saddle. But my belt was caught on the saddle horn, and each buck jammed the horn into my unprotected abdomen. My eyes were squeezed closed, and my face was buried in Patch's mane, with white knuckles clenching his hair in panic desperation. He had stopped bucking, and I was draped across his back, trying to catch my breath, but I felt sick. Prying my fingers loose, I had to shake out the pain of them being so cramped on his neck. I untangled my belt and slowly sat up. My friend was calling to me, but I couldn't comprehend her. It was as if I was underwater with distorted sounds all around me. I mumbled I wanted to go home. When I looked down at my abdomen, I saw that the skin had been broken. By all the trauma to it, I was bloody and instantly black and blue. I wanted so desperately to control the trail ride, but I didn't feel well. My abdomen felt weird and wrong and heavy. Everything hurt as I swayed in rhythm to Patch's walk. When we finally got back to the barn, I handed Patch off to my friend after attacking him, got in my car, and went home. When I came stumbling into the door, my mother was instantly upon me, asking me what had happened. And then she insisted that I go to the ER. I felt so badly I brushed her off and went to bed. Everything was a blur my first day of work. I staggered around following the group tour for new teachers in a daze. At lunch, I ended up excusing myself. My abdomen was pulsing and chills ran up and down my spine as I staggered to the bathroom. I kept telling myself it was first day jitters, that I was fine. But when I went to use the bathroom, there was nothing but blood. Don't panic, Rebecca, don't panic, everything's okay, you're fine. I kept trying to calm myself down as I went to find my boss to tell him I had an emergency, and I had to go home, I needed my mom. I barely got into the house when I collapsed, doubled over, in the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. I was swimming headed and cold, and I could only barely gasp out to my poor mother what had happened. My parents scooped me up and rushed me to the hospital. The doctors and nurses rushed around trying to find out what was wrong with me, all while attempting to control that crippling pain. I learned as they wheeled me down for an emergency surgery that I had perforated my intestines and I had gone septic from all the bowel seeping into my body. I was given less than a 50-50 chance of ever waking up again. The anesthesiologist told me to be brave as he slowly counted backwards and everything faded to black. Morphine makes everything so hazy. I could see myself lying in the hospital bed, tubes all down my throat and nose, no less than 5 IVs in each arm. I looked like shit. My dear mother sleeping slumped over the arm of her chair. I remember thinking it was an odd dream to be having. I watched the dials and meters as they showed my vitals plummeting. The sudden blare of warning bells on all the machines, and with a jolt, I realized I was watching myself die. There was nothing I could do. Nothing I could scream as a panicked nurse shook my mother awake and a team of people, all rushed in the room, all trying to save me. It was like a bad dream where you were paralyzed and mute and can only experience in a kind of silent horror that something incredibly bad is happening. But the more I watched that horrible scene, the more I felt a tug. And as I looked away, this beautiful golden light came over me. All the fear and panic dissipated. Immediately from me, as I suddenly was filled with such a peaceful sense of warmth and love. A golden road flanked by yellow and orange clouds lay before me. And as I floated along it, I became nothing but love and warmth and peace itself. Death, I realized, was not something to fear. A figure stopped me. There were no voices, nothing aloud, but I was greeted with such a warming love And without a word uttered, I knew what the figure was telling me. It was like everything formed in my mind for communication. But see, I had a choice. I had a choice to take this exit point, to end this life, or I could go back because there was still so much to live. Time had no meaning in this space. It felt like an eternity as I reflected on my choice to stay or to go. It seemed like such a simple choice. I had never felt such warmth and love in all my being until that moment, and I never wanted to part with it. My life, surely at 27, was lived. What more was there to do? Images started to form in my mind of everything I loved about life, and I realized there were things that I would miss if I continued forward. I would miss my horses. I would miss those lovely fall rainy days. I would miss the way the sunlight filters into my bedroom in the mornings. Not even to mention I would miss all my friends and family quite terribly. There was so much more of life to live, so much more to do. Life is beautiful and messy and complicated and lovely. I formed an image of myself waking up in the hospital bed to show the figure, and I was flung back. In less than a blink of an eye, I was slammed into my body, slammed into the chaos of alarm bells and people rushing around me. A nurse knelt down beside me and started to stroke my face, telling me that I was okay, that I was safe, and that I was here, and that I had my whole life ready to live. Thank you.
First time storyteller, y'all, Rebecca Medlin. So beautiful. Okay, we have one more amazing story, and then we're going to take a quick break. Get up, stretch your legs, say hi to people you haven't gotten to see in so long. Grab a drink, and then we have 4 more unbelievable stories after intermission. Do not move a muscle. All right, number 4. She's worked as a registered nurse in the Roanoke Valley for 35 years. She enjoys traveling the back roads and once rode all the way to Burlington, Vermont with her favorite travel companion, her brother Nathan, without ever going on an interstate highway. She lives in Grandin Village in a little brick house full of vintage thrift store finds, and the front yard is decorated with bowling balls. She has told a few times, but we're thrilled to welcome her back. Please welcome sassy Sandra Collins.
It was a hot Sunday in July 2018, and I had just walked a large portion of the Huckleberry Trail and eaten a big brunch in Blacksburg. And the last thing I wanted to do was take the long way home on a country road. But my friend with me insisted, and I finally said, okay, if this will make you shut up, I will. So we started down Route 42, and I said, you know, I've been on this road before, this isn't so bad. And there's this overlook towards the end that I want to stop at. As we go over the curve, or around the curve to the overlook, I go, we're not going to be alone. And I see this guy, stocky build, he's got a long gray beard, he's got long hair, and he's got a classic Harley-Davidson motorcycle parked right beside him. And I also see that he's looking at his cell phone. And I'm like, you know, that's kind of weird, because I know this part of Craig County, and I know that there's not any cell service. So I get out of my car and I go, hey, what are you doing? And he said, I'm looking for Interstate 81. And And my Lord, that man sounded like somebody right out of the movie Fargo. I laughed and I said, you know, you're a long ways away from Interstate 81 here, but I can help you. So I turned around, went over to my car, got a paper map out of the glove box. Also took a quick look in my side mirror to make sure that my red lipstick was more or less intact. And it was. So I walked back over to where he was and I spread that map out and I showed him how to get to Interstate 81 from Route 42 in Crow County. And he looked at me and he said, you know, I'm not from around here, like I didn't already figure that one out. And I've got some time off work and I'd like to learn more about this place. Would you like to be my tour guide? I said, well, you know, just so happens I have some time off work too. And I said, yeah, we can do that. So we exchanged names and telephone numbers, and I went on about my way. Driving back home, I thought, you know, I wonder if this guy's gonna call me or not. I haven't had the best luck with men. Some of you guys know that. I thought, well, you know, if he calls me, that's great. If he doesn't, oh well, it was a fun, you know, just casual encounter, you know, on a Sunday afternoon. I go home, I've got his name and his telephone number, so for 1995, I learned a whole lot about him. And it's pretty good, you know, it's okay. So he pretty much told the truth about who he was and where he was from. So the next morning, I get a phone call. And he says, do you have a motorcycle helmet? I said, no. He said, well, meet me at the Harley shop, and we'll get you one. So I go over to Peters Creek, and I'll let you know this is the first time I've ever been in a Harley store. But I walk in, and I look at the helmets, and I pick a middle-of-the-range price helmet, go up to the counter, take my wallet out to pay for it. And he said, no, I'm going to pay for this helmet. And at the end of the week, when I leave, you can put this helmet on a shelf, and you will have a lot of good memories. Oh, well, that sounds pretty nice to me, and that was a sweet gesture. So I drive back to my house. He follows me on his motorcycle. I run in my house, change clothes, and he's sitting there on his bike. And so I swing my leg over, and I'm like, what do I do with my hands? I mean, I've ridden on the back of a motorcycle before, but you know, I knew these guys, you know. He said, either side of my waist, right here where my belt loops are, just put your hands there. And you can sit a little closer if you want to. So I scoot a little bit closer, but I made sure there was space between my chest and his back. So I'm, you know, holding on. And we go north on the Blue Ridge Parkway to Peaks of Otter. And we go into the restaurant to order some food, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be the first test. I said, you need to know that I'm a vegetarian. He's like, oh, well, that sounds pretty good. I've been trying to eat more healthy, so that sounds like a good idea to me. Well, you know, that's the last thing I expected to hear from a big old meat and potatoes Minnesota man. We ate, we rode back to my house. He dropped me off, and he said, okay, you plan what we're going to do tomorrow, and let me know what time to pick you up. So he goes off to his hotel room, and I go in my house. The next day, he picks me up, and we go south on the parkway to Floyd, where we both order vegetarian entrees at the restaurant. I'm like, man, you know, this guy's really serious. I thought this was, you know, he was just kind of playing along with it. So I decide going back home, we're going to go down 221, the windy Bent Mountain way. So we're going back to my house, going down Bent Mountain, and he's going slow, because they have a lot of straight roads in Minnesota. They don't have mountains and stuff. You know, Catawba Mountain is about as high as their highest mountain in Minnesota. So we get to the house, he helps me off the motorcycle, and he says, "You got a lot of curves." And I'm like, "Yeah, we do." Because I was sure he was talking about Bent Mountain. So I said, "Okay." And then he said, we're standing out there on the sidewalk in front of my house, and he said, "Now tomorrow's my 60th birthday. And I'd like to do something special. So I want you to plan what we're going to do tomorrow." And I said, "All right." So I walk in the house and I'm going, "Man, I really like this guy. And he really smells good. He smells like Dial soap and Tide detergent, and I really like him, but he's made it clear that he is leaving at the end of the week." So I'm just keeping that in mind. So the next morning, his 60th birthday, he picks me up, then we head out to Hollins University, where Eric Fitzpatrick has his great Southern culture exhibit. Maybe some of you guys saw it a few years ago. It was just absolutely fabulous. We were there several hours looking at the paintings and reading every word of the text accompanying each painting. And he was like, "I've never done anything like this before, but this is really great. This guy is really talented." And so we talked about living in the South and him living in Minnesota and all that sort of stuff. He'd also told me that he liked live music. It was his 60th birthday, and I knew that there was some really great music at the Spot on Kirk. So we went to the Spot on Kirk. Freddie McGregor, a great Grammy-nominated reggae performer, was there. So we're in there. It's a nice little cozy place, if you've ever been there. And we're standing there just swaying to the music and clapping, and it's just great. And then he turns around and kisses me. And I'm like, "Whoa. What's this all about?" And he just looked at me. He said, "Well, it just kind of seemed like the right thing to do." Okay. So we spend the rest of the night there listening to the music, and I'm leaned up against him, and he's got his arms around my waist. We get on the bike, go back to my house, and he's like, "Can I come in?" Well, this is a real test, because people either love my house or they don't. They think it's either cute and cool or cluttered and messy. But heck, why do I care what this guy thinks? Because he's leaving at the end of the week anyway, so come on in. So he comes into the house and he says, "Wow, this looks like a woman's house." I'm a woman and I live here. Yes, it's a woman's house. And he said, "I get really tired of being in hotel rooms all the time." And just if you're keeping track, this was our third date. And yes, he did spend the night. So the next morning, I get up. Now, I'm not going to give you all those details. The next morning, I get up, make us some breakfast, and we head up to the Mill Mountain Star. And we talk about Roanoke and how much I love Roanoke and all that. And then we go see a movie right here at the Grandin Theater. And he agreed that the very best popcorn anywhere was right here at the Grandin Theater. So we leave here, we go back to my house, a mile away from here, by the way, and he drops me off, and he goes back to his hotel room. And he says, "Tomorrow's my last day here, so let's make it special. You decide what you want to do, and we'll do it." So the next morning, he picks me up, I get on the back of his bike, and I get as close as I can to him with my arms around his waist, because I never, ever want to forget this. So we go across 311. We go to the restaurant there at Paint Bank. We come back. He helps me off the bike, gives me a nice big hug and a great kiss, and he says, bye. And I stand there and I watch him as he gets back on his bike, and he smiles, this great smile with that one dimple, puts his helmet on, revs up the motorcycle, and I watch him drive away. I go into the house, I take the helmet, and I put it on top of my bookcase. And I go out back to my deck and sit there that hot Friday night in July and go, what in the hell just happened this week? The next morning I get up, making my coffee for Saturday morning, and I notice my phone rings. And it's Dan, motorcycle, Harley Davidson, Minnesota. I go, oh, okay. Oh, hi there. What? And he said, I don't want to go back to Minnesota. I want to stay here in Roanoke. And then he says, can I move in with you? Remember, he has stayed one night at my house. I take a deep breath, I think about it for just a quick moment, and I say yes. And then, that was a little quick, but September 28th, 2019, my 60th birthday, I said yes again. In my second favorite place in the world, Key West, Florida. Only a really fortunate stroke of serendipity would bring together a liberal Democrat woman from Virginia and a sort of conservative, not really Republican man from Minnesota together on a country road. Like my husband would say, you can't make this Our next storyteller, also a Hoot and Holler fan favorite. He's an educator and television producer who loves his wife, children, and the Grandin Theater. We're about to play a little song, and he requests that the audience sing along if you know it, and I bet you do. Please welcome Mr. Tom Landon.
I want to start this. The theme is serendipity, and I just feel like a disclaimer is in order. I'm a 58-year-old white man born to college-educated parents. I have a little privilege, and serendipity has followed me my whole life. So, that said, I came to Roanoke 1985. Wasn't long before I got a job working for a small video production company. It was a good job for a 22-year-old guy. Traveled a lot. My boss was maybe a little less than ethical, but it was fun. This is when I learned that I was kind of a 7-year guy, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I met my future wife. She saw what I was going through at work, and she said, you know, I think maybe you're a little better than this. And she encouraged me to go back to school, and she said, I think you'd be a great teacher. That idea had never occurred to me in a million years. I was not what you would call teacher material in high school, for sure. But she turned out to be right, and that was how I found myself teaching middle school social studies. special place in heaven for middle school teachers. And I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, probably most because I have about an 8th grade sense of humor. So that helped. But I remember in year 6 or so of teaching, there was a dark morning before the clocks changed when I pulled up to a brick building with my greasy sandwich in a bag. And I thought, I'm really going to go in this building and I'm not going to come out. It's probably going to be dark by the time I come out. And is this really how I want to spend my time? And thankfully, right about that time, a friend of mine who worked at Blue Ridge Public Television called me. It's now called Blue Ridge PBS, but we were Blue Ridge Public Television back then. She called me and she said, I got a job for you. I'd like you to come and be a trainer for teachers. I'd like you to drive around the western part of the state and teach teachers how to use digital cameras and all kinds of things like that. And I ended up loving that job, and I ended up producing television and having a show, and it was a lot of fun. And about 6.5 years in, we got a new boss. It's Veterans Day, so I don't want to besmirch veterans, because he was as military as they get. But he and I just didn't see eye to eye, and it became clear that it was not going to work. One day he came to me, and the latest thing he was going to ask me to do, he says, somebody's using the conference room today, and they are from the Department of Education, and so your job is to make them coffee and make sure they can get on the Wi-Fi, and don't leave the building until they're done. I'm like, all right, whatever. Guy walks in, I said, what are you here for? What are you doing today? And he said, we've launched this online school. We're in our 2nd big year. We're hiring a bunch of social studies teachers for these online teachers. Serendipity. So I go back to my office, I email him my resume. 2 weeks later, I'm a social studies teacher for Virtual Virginia. And that was great. I loved it because it gave me the freedom not to go into a brick building. It gave me the ability to work on my front porch, it gave me the ability to work in my pajamas, it gave me the ability to follow my wife when she got a fellowship at Harvard, and I didn't have to give up my job or my benefits because I just did my job from Cambridge. It was great. But after a few years of teaching the same thing, I did start to get a little stuck, and maybe it was not as hard for me as it should have been to do the job. And I didn't get itchy to quit, and thankfully some really smart people I work with said, have you ever thought about being a school administrator? Now, I'd had a lot of run-ins with school administrators in my school. I never thought of myself as the man. Still don't. But I thought, that's an interesting idea, and I did. I went back to school and I got my administrative license. And a few years later, I found myself as the director of instruction at Virtual Virginia, which means we had kind of 2 of us who were second in command. And what I learned is that when you're a school administrator, you don't get the summers off, first of all. And the end of the school day is not the end of your work day. And everybody has your phone number, and everybody has your email address. And the longer you do it, the more people have your phone number, and the more people have your email address. So as I got into what would have been my 14th year, I went to my boss and I said, look, this has been fun. I've enjoyed it. Don't really like the 60-hour work weeks. My wife's doing pretty well. I think I'm going to take a break. So you should look for another director of instruction next year. It took me a long time to say that because we really had a good working relationship. And I told him that in January of 2020. Something happened in March of 2020. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. But all hell broke loose, right? And as one of the people who was running the state's online high school, I had a pretty important job at that point. I became an essential worker. I don't think I'd ever thought of myself as essential before that time, but I was. I mean, it was really important. 450 schools, 132 school divisions, the governor saying our name at press conferences. It was heady time for an online school administrator. And even though I said I wasn't going to sign my contract, it felt like the wrong time to leave. It would have been wrong. So I hung in there. I said, you know what, I'll give it another year. Yes, this is my 14th year, 7 times 2, 14. But 60-hour work weeks turned into 80-hour work weeks. Went on vacation to Maine and didn't stop working the whole time. Stopped sleeping well, stopped exercising, lost my appetite. And one day I noticed that when I walked by my office at home, I really didn't want to go in. And within a couple days, I noticed that when I sat down in my chair, it felt like an electric chair. My whole body was buzzing. And I couldn't eat, and I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't shut it off. And my smart wife said, well, it sounds like you might be having an anxiety attack. Have you heard of these things, panic attacks? Don't recommend them, 1 star. And it was true, I couldn't work, I physically couldn't work. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. And it was weird. Called my doctor, I have a great doctor. Xanax, have you heard of Xanax? 5 stars. 5 stars. That helped. Was able to sleep a little bit, started exercising, felt a little better. Good therapist, once a day for a week, once a week for a month, then every month. That really helped. Friends were helpful. But this was in August, and I just never said goodbye to my friends at work. I just quit working. I just couldn't do it. They were great about leaving me alone. It got to be December, and it was clear, I already knew I wasn't coming back, but that was when I officially gave my notice. My sick days were running out. I just had to take a break. I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Anybody else have that problem? And I really didn't know what to do, but I got a little better, I hope, at doing things like cooking. Beth was on deadline, serious stuff, and I cooked more, and I hopefully cleaned a little more. The basement got cleaned for the first time ever. And then, I would say it's out of the blue, it's not quite true, but I got a call from the Virginia Film Commission. It turns out they were making this TV show in Richmond and Clifton Forge. You might have heard of it, it's called Dope Sick. And would I be able to help with the location team? And the only reason they called was that half of the location team that was supposed to go to Clifton Forge had either COVID or COVID exposure, and they were in hotel rooms in Richmond. And so they called, and I said, sure, get me out of the house. I'm sure Beth was very happy about this. And I got in the car, and for a couple weeks I drove to Clifton Forge, and I did things like help them figure out where to park the dumpster, where to put the porta potty. At what time did all the merchants on Main Street in Clifton Forge have to have their cars off the streets? This was important movie-making material. I really loved it. It was really fun. I wasn't in the union, so I didn't get to be there when they were actually filming, but I would be somewhere else setting something else up. It was great. After the 2 weeks were up, they kept me on for a little while longer. It was really fun. Driving around, finding the roads that Michael Keaton was going to drive his Ford F-150 down that would look pretty. It was a good job. But it ended. And when I came back home after that, I felt a little better. Like, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I feel like things are looking up. It was right about that time. By now I'm sleeping, I'm eating, feeling pretty good. And I get a call out of the blue from Big Bird. No, not actually, but from Blue Ridge PBS. And they said, we've got some state funding to do education work again. They had lost it during the recession. And would I like to come back and help them figure out what to do with that money and how to bring the station into a more modern stance and do more with video on demand and all kinds of other things. And I said yes, but I'm not starting until August. I took the rest of the summer and I enjoyed myself. I walked in the building to the same office I had had 15 years before at Blue Ridge PBS. And it's been great. I'm producing shows, I'm having ideas like us being here tonight, and I feel really good. And I don't really have a moral to the story other than make good friends who will give you good advice. Listen to your body when you need to stop doing something that's not good for it anymore. And it doesn't hurt if 30 years in advance you marry a New York Times bestselling author.
Tom Landon. A little bit of a different flavor from his other stories. We appreciate the serendipity of it all. All right, our next storyteller. Now, y'all, I'm going to need some leaning in on this one. This is a first-time storyteller. She has worked her ass off, and I've been pushing her hard. And she has risen to the occasion every time, and I'm super proud of her. She's a Roanoke native. She's the founder and owner of Divine Flow, a multi-layered holistic practice focusing on finding creative solutions to overcoming life's obstacles. She's trained with some of the top teachers in their fields to discover how to manifest best for her clients, utilizing a combination of Reiki, Feng Shui, space clearing, chakra balancing, elemental energy clearing, numerology, and oracle card readings. Woo! She lives in Roanoke, Virginia with her beautiful son and black Labrador retriever named Venus. Lean in, y'all. Bring the love. Please welcome Beth Fulton.
I kicked the bucket in September of 2007. I was 35 years old. I was at the end of a 7-year cycle of disappointment starting at the age of 28. If you're familiar with astrology, this period is referred to as the Saturn return. Around the age of 28, 29, 30, that's when the Saturn return comes for you. And Saturn is the planet of life lessons, hard work, and karma. It signifies stepping fully into adulthood, and I went there kicking and screaming. In those 7 years, I had experienced deep grief, betrayal, then divorce, and most recently, a broken engagement. I know I needed to make some changes, but first I needed a vacation. So I wanted somewhere calm and relaxing to sort out my life and gain some clarity. So I decided on a place called the Miraval Spa in Tucson, Arizona. Okay, I went big, okay? It was an all-inclusive 5-star resort with 2 spa services a day, organic food and juices, and amazing workshops. One that caught my eye was called the Equine Experience, and it involved working with horses. Now, I love animals and always have, and been curious about horses, but intimidated by their size and strength. My intuition told me this was the perfect place to connect with them. So I called up the spa, and the lady on the phone said there was only 1 spot left. So I took it as a sign, and I booked it. Next thing I recall, I was on an airplane heading to Arizona, and from there I took a shuttle to the Miraval, a place I still consider heaven on earth. Upon arrival, I immediately checked in my room, which just happened to be room 420. And then I managed to squeeze in a massage before orientation. When I arrived at orientation, the energy of the room was buzzing. Before long, the workshop facilitator named Wyatt Webb entered the room. There he is right there. He was a quintessential cowboy. Wyatt had a commanding yet gentle presence, and some have described him as part tough love, part psychic, and part Kenny Rogers. There was something quite mysterious about Wyatt. And before our group introductions, Wyatt took some time to tell us about himself. He started his career as a country music artist, so the song that was playing when I entered was his. And while on tour, he became an addict. From there, he went into recovery. And while in recovery, he studied various types of therapy, including using horses to help troubled adolescents. So after introductions, Wyatt pulled out a flip chart. And he started writing down profound ideas about fear and shame. I said, wait a minute, this is therapy? This is not what I signed up for. This certainly doesn't sound like grooming horses and riding through the desert. But on the other hand, this shaman cowboy was blowing my mind. Now, you can call this experience serendipity or divine intervention, but I know I was at the right place at the right time, and I can feel it in my bones. The next morning, my stomach was doing flips. We arrived at the horse ring bright and early, and were greeted by Wyatt's $1 million smile. We gathered around him as he explained the exercise we were about to perform. And then he introduced us to the Arabian rescue horse we'd be working with named Adu. The task sounded simple enough. We take turns going up to Adu to clean his shoe. To do this, we needed to pinch the area on the back of his ankle, which is a way of asking him to lift his foot. And then we used a small tool to clean his hoof. How hard can this be? I'm just asking Adu to raise his foot. After the first two people were unsuccessful, I raised my hand to take a crack at it. Like other things in my life, I thought I could get Adu to lift his foot by sheer force and willpower. But as I got closer to this 2,000-pound animal, I became terrified. My stomach was in knots. My mind was racing, and my brain was just going 100 miles an hour. And I was thinking, what if he kicks me? What if I fail? I don't know a damn thing about horses, and what the hell did I get myself into? So I took a deep breath, and then I walked over to Adu. I pinched the back of his ankle, and guess what? He did not lift his foot. So I tried again. I pinched and I pinched harder and harder until I became hot and flesh all over my body. And Wyatt walked up to me, and it felt like his blue eyes could see straight through my soul. Beth, what are you feeling right now? And what are you here to let go of? The thing that came up for me was anger. Anger. He narrowed his eyes and continued, at what age do you remember something bad happening to you and you felt anger in your body? Close your eyes and tell me when you have that memory. It wasn't hard to do. So I thought back to when I was 8 years old. My stepdad, yeah, he was drunk again, and he was physically hurting my mom. My heart was in my stomach. Adrenaline was coursing through my veins, and in my tiny hand was a wooden Jimmy Connors tennis racket. I was about to strike the back of this 6-foot monster when he turned around to face me. A tornado of rage rose up in my body and my heart was racing. With a clenched jaw, I gave Wyatt the nod that I was ready. Wyatt pointed to something white out in the ring. You see that bucket over there? Go kick that bucket. So I firmly walked up to that bucket and pulled my leg back, and I kicked the ever-living shit out of that bucket. I did. And I stood there afterwards stunned. The sound of Wyatt's voice brought me back to the present moment. Now you go ask that horse to lift his leg. So I approached the horse, strong and centered in my body. No expectations this time. After squeezing Adu's ankle, he immediately lifted his foot. A whoosh of energy came over me, and I got goosebumps from head to toe. Something in me had shifted. Tears were streaming down my face. I was full of love and gratitude for this majestic beast. This beautiful, angelic rescue horse had now rescued me. Adu showed me what trust and authenticity feels like. It was pure magic. Before we left the ring, Wyatt told us why he named his horse Adu. He said the name Adu means goodbye forever. I knew I would never be the same. And they say the Miraval was built on a Native American energy vortex. And on the third night of the workshop, I experienced just that. I had the craziest, most profound dreams ever. There was fire, there was drumming, galloping horses, screaming, and scalping. Yep. I woke up at 3 a.m. in a pool of sweat, and in this lucid dream, I literally felt old fear and trauma leaving my body. Upon returning home, I felt the energy of everything. It seemed every time I looked up, I would see 11:11 or 1:11 on the clock. Here it is 14 years later, and I feel brave enough to share my story on 11:11. After the Miraval, more miraculous things happened. I met a man, I got married, I gave birth to my beautiful soulmate son, who turns 11 next week. And guess what time he was born? 4:20. Yeah. You would have thought 11, but no, it was 4:20 in the afternoon. Yeah. So within the last 9 years, I've made a career out of working with energy. I now get to help others awaken to their intuition, let go of their old baggage, and overcome obstacles in their life. And so yes, serendipity happened for me when I found myself sleepwalking into the Miraval Resort, kicking the bucket in the horse ring, feeling resurrected, and waking up inside my own heart. I'll always remember that fall day in September when I was reunited with the joyful spark I was born with.
Horse stories. It just all kind of started happening. It's so beautiful. It's serendipitous. Oh my God. Goddess. All right. 2 more unbelievable stories coming at you. Okay. Our next storyteller, first timer, leaning in with the love. He's a native of Roanoke Valley and has been a working musician here for close to 40 years. This is his first time performing at Hoot and Holler. Please welcome, big love, Adam Markham.
My name is Adam Markham. I was born in the wilds of western Bedford County, by God, Bedford County. And that's where the story took place. It was serendipity led me to have a kind of interesting meeting at a very young age. This would have been, I would say somewhere between summer of '69 and early '70. So I was 2 years old. My mother, you'll see a picture, there's my mother. She, by the way, if anybody doubts the veracity of my story, she can confirm for you. She's here in the audience. So, Mom was a horse person, and she was notorious for rescuing horses. And she was notorious for rescuing ponies, And famously, once my father said, you're going to get another horse? We had 13, I think, at one point. And she said, yes, but it's a very sick pony. And he said, Linda, you can't rescue all the sick ponies. You just can't do it. But at any rate, she had gotten wind of a beast that she was interested in. So we had a 1969 Ford Thunderbird, which looked just the same color, meadowlark yellow. Had this enormous back seat. It wrapped around you like a love seat. It was absolutely beautiful. She took my little 2-year-old body and lashed me into what passed for a child carrier seat in the 1960s. It was probably made of angle iron, you know, with a half-inch of foam padding and some naugahyde, sparkle red naugahyde on the outside. And she tied me in with a few bungee cords, put me in the middle of the back seat where I could see between the front buckets. And we had a nice little ride. This gentleman was a noted horseman. He lived out in Bee Hollow in down Jordantown Road. Bee Hollow's just fun to say. I like throwing that into the story. So we drive down to Bee Hollow, and she pulls up beside the barn, and the barn is about here, relative to the car. I can picture, oddly enough, this is probably my earliest memory. At 2 or so, I can picture most of it far more clearly than I can see you right now, but very, very clearly. So Mom pulls up, she puts the car in the park, and she says, I'm going to go talk to the gentleman, and you wait here. So I sat there in the car, twiddling my thumbs, doing whatever a 2-year-old does, and I can picture it all clearly. The windows were down, it was a beautiful day, full sun, the barn was red, and all of a sudden, a monkey jumps, much like this angry capuchin here, I'm not sure of his actual breed, but a monkey jumps up into the passenger window of the car. Very determined little fellow. And he jumped up, and I looked at him, and he looked at me. And I had not intellectually developed enough that at that point that I realized that this was virtually impossible. But I do remember looking at him and thinking, well, damn, you don't see that every day. So the monkey looks at me, he kind of chatters his teeth, his little tail swishing around. And he jumps down into the passenger seat. He jumps onto the console, he reaches up to the ignition, takes the keys out, climbs back the way he came, he sits in the window, gives me an expression much like that, and hisses at me and takes off with the keys. So I'll just get back to twiddling my thumbs. So after an indeterminate length of time, Mom comes back. She sits and she gets in the driver's seat, she reaches the ignition. And she pulls her purse out, and she looked at me and said, Adam, where are the keys? I said, monkey took them. So she took a deep breath, and she said, Adam, where are the keys? And I said, monkey took them. To this day, one of my biggest psychological hot buttons is injustice. I don't know how she thought my little chubby 2-year-old arms could have possibly reached all the way from the back seat with the strapping cables around me and everything, and taking the ignition keys. But nonetheless, Mom's continuing to get agitated. Things are deteriorating rapidly, and the rancher comes by. And he hears a commotion. He said, what's going on here? And she said, well, he took the keys. He says a monkey took them. He said, that goddamn monkey. Well, the farmer did indeed have a monkey. He knew he knew the monkey's favorite hiding places. So after a brief trip into the barn to grab a 40-foot ladder, the barn was probably close to the height of this room, He climbs the ladder, scales the ladder, finds the monkey. I can even picture where it was. It was in the far opposite corner of the barn, up in the gutter, playing with Mom's keys. And so the keys were retrieved, but I'm not sure. Serendipity, when Lee gave the definition earlier, it definitely involved a positive experience. I'm not sure if the experience was completely positive, but it was definitely interesting. I definitely ingrained itself successfully into my brain that 53 years later I can sit here and tell you exactly what it looked like. But that is serendipity. Thank you.
What just happened? Isn't that such a cool twist on serendipity? I mean, it was serendipity. Anyway, we will be doing this again, y'all. Like a lot. Anyway, here we are, last storyteller. Whew, take a breath. She is a hip-shaking earth mom with a penchant for good wine, an occasional F-bomb, and howling at the moon.
Oh, yeah.
She is the proprietress of Soul Body Connect. Her passion on this planet is helping humans get out of their heads and find that sacred place where body meets soul and their cosmic groove is once again restored. And she is a master at this. Please put your hands together for Lindsay Mckinnon.
I introduced myself to Nancy as I took a seat next to her in that very crowded elbow-to-elbow restaurant in New York City. It was 2012, and I was in the city for a series of women's empowerment workshops. Yes. So, you have children, she asked. Yes, I have 2 boys. She looked all of a sudden confused, as though I was wrong, and leaned in a little closer. Wait, not 3 children? Oh no, only 2 children has come through this. And I am done. That is enough for me, no more. And suddenly she looked shocked and stunned and withdrew from the conversation. So I just started another conversation with another friend at the table in New York City. And then she interrupted me. I am so sorry, but I have to tell you this. I am a medium, and I work with the energetic vibration of babies before they are born into this world and after they pass. And I need to let you know that there is a 3rd child that would very much like to be a part of your family and come through you. Now, I was the one confused. You do not have to say yes. It is totally up to you, but just know that this child is going to be embodied in this earth, whether it comes from you or through another woman. But she has chosen you. If you were to say yes. So now I was stunned, and I was also certain that I was done. 2 was enough for me. Even though Patrick and Logan had always asked for a baby sister, their answer, my response, was always the same. Oh, no way, Jose. I like our family just the way it is. And besides, you can't special order babies like you special order French fries. You can't supersize it As for catch-up, no catch-up, that's not how it works. But I love you. Kiss, kiss. So, 4 years later, in 2016, when my house burned down and my 2 beautiful boys died, I walked this earth numb as a childless mother, having no idea what to do other than just take one more breath. I survived a life-altering, epic trauma, and I knew in the depths of my being and my bones that my boys would want me to live, and not only just get by taking one breath or one step, but to fully live the fullest potential that I could possibly conceive or dream. I knew that. And then one day, I remembered Nancy in that New York City restaurant, and I hunted her down in her California apartments. What were the first words that came out of my mouth when she answered her phone? I know, Lindsay, I have been expecting your phone call for a long, long time. You have been through so much. Her voice was genuine, and it felt like a healing balm. I asked, "What is it that you do again?" And in that conversation that lasted hours, I learned that my boys, Patrick and Logan, did not feel any physical pain in their passing, and that there was still a third vibration in the form of a baby that would just love to come through. I didn't know what any of this meant. I was in deep, deep grief. This baby had been hanging around me all this time, wanting to be born if I were to say yes. It felt too big to share with my then husband, so I kept it a secret for a while. You see, when you're grieving the loss of your children, with whom you've wrapped your entire identity around, your entire life around, your entire future around, it is not the time to start thinking or talking about having a third. It feels dishonorable. But it hung around in the air. It anchored into my heart, and it carved the capacity in my soul for possibilities, for this and. Okay. Now let's all just take a deep breath, because I know that I'm giving you a lot, and this is a lot to digest, so go ahead and let it out. Okay, we're breathing? We're breathing again. Okay, thank you. I'll continue with my story. I began to feel that biological time clock ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. I was already in my 40s and not getting any younger, and I know how these things can shake down. So I finally gained the courage to mention it to my husband. I asked him to consider having a third child, and that I would not even bring it up in a conversation again for at least another year. I'm so sorry. It just still felt unfair. Meanwhile, we traveled internationally. We had amazing otherworldly experiences all over the world, experiences that were fun and playful and mysterious. Gratitude came back into our lives in a way that I had never known gratitude before. We bought a house in Costa Rica. We dove deep into our healing process. Nothing about it was easy. And thank God for community, and thank God for friends. So, you can imagine my shock when in August of 2017, I found out that I was pregnant. It was a total surprise, and I couldn't even share the news with my then husband for 3 days. Trinity Acadia McKinnon was born in our brand new home. In a warm pool of water in our dining room that had been designed for the birth of a goddess. I labored for all of 1 hour and 17 minutes. Those contractions brought me to my knees, and she still brings me to my knees. Floating in the water, I navigated those birth positions, and I commanded my breath. Easy, baby. Easy, go easy on your mama. The deeper the breath, the deeper the contraction, and out she came into my own hands, onto my chest, feeling her breath on my neck. It was the most magical moment, and unlike the home births of her 2 older brothers, Patrick and Logan, I did not bleed, which meant that I did not have to get out of that tub as quickly, and we allowed her to just unfold naturally. We gazed into each other's eyes. We whispered and spoke to her with the most tender voices, and tears falling into those sacred waters. Oh my God. Patrick and Logan got their wish. A baby sister, red hair, freckles, special ordered from beyond, minus the French fries, but a supersized wish, indeed. Now, let me tell you, life as a single working mom in COVID has not been easy. But one thing I do know is how to navigate the hard while embracing the magical, serendipitous moments. And if you're paying attention, they happen all the time. All the time. If you're willing to play with the universe and flirt with the universe. It's so fun. Sometimes they come while rolling down a sunny hillside with Trinity, or stealing kisses from one another first thing when she wakes up in the morning. Or, this happened just the other day, shifting an epic 3-year-old temper tantrum in the middle of the kitchen to an epic dance break to that goddamn Frozen song, Let It Go. If I could bottle these moments, I have learned that serendipity comes naturally from being in the moment and following the joy, not the agenda, the joy that's actually happening. Allowing it to unfold and woo and wow you. She climbs my body like a human playground. And I love it, just like her brothers did. Trinity is my serendipity, or at least she is an amplifier through which serendipity comes. And yes, she is here for a reason. I am so deeply honored that we all get to discover and watch it unfold. I am so grateful that she chose us, which means that she also chose you. And I chose to say yes to being a mother again in this crazy good and very strange world. It is the hardest, and I celebrate that every day.